I'm glad to see our listeners this day again because today we're gonna record another amazing episode of Empower the Data, our podcast where business begins with data and AI leads the way. Today we have an amazing guest and his name is Jaison Mathew. Jaison, say hello to our listeners. Jaison, I don't hear you. Can you say this one more time? Yes, now you're with us. Great. So, talking about the Jaison, in your profile it says that you are author of award-winning product, engineering enthusiast, generative AI transformation, visionary expert in utilizing AI, and the list goes on. That's a lot of things in your profile, and I can read it, I guess, for the half of the podcast. But I'm not going to do this, and I will let you introduce yourself and tell our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what you do. So, Jaison, please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you, Yuri, for providing me the opportunity to come and speak on your podcast. This is exciting for you guys as you're launching your podcast. But for myself, I'm Jaison Mathew. I've been an advisor, consultant to many of CTOs in my past life. Owned my own business for some years. And focus mostly around quality assurance in the latest era because I feel like there's such a huge need within the quality assurance and quality control space with folks not trying to understand the difference between the two. Some time ago, about 5 years ago, I started on a journey of setting up something called testing an agile framework, which now has morphed into AQUA Framework, which is AI Augmented Quality Assurance. And the focus is to take all of the pain points and challenges that many of the organizations are undergoing at the present moment or in the past, and bringing in generative AI and other means to help organization perform a whole host of things. So in structuring, ensuring that roles and responsibilities within quality assurance and other spaces are set up in correctly, and then ultimately scaling up Agile as well. So or testing in Agile, it's a lot to unpack as we talk about these different challenges that most organizations are undergoing. So I'm excited to see AI in the formation of things and where we were 5 years ago to where we are now. There's been a lot of not only hype around AI, but some of it is pragmatic approaches, and some of it is, some noise that are being heard in between. So we have to take and commingle both of them and take pull out the weed from the weed.
Okay, so that sounds great. Thank you for sharing. I'm pretty sure that you're the greatest fit for our podcast, and you already introduced yourself, told us about a little bit about the AQUA framework. But I have another, I would say, more personal question. In your profile, it says that you're author that working on a book about modern quality engineering practices. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. And it goes into some of what I said with the AQUA framework. But when you look at quality assurance, most people title quality assurance as it makes it sound like it's synonymous to software testing, and it is not. There's a difference between organizations that really want to implement and embark on a journey of preventing issues or defects or bugs from occurring in the production environment to software testing is really a safety net, right? And so the delineating both of those different areas are one of my key focuses in the book but also even ensuring that we're bringing in the right people in the organization using top grade approaches to make sure that we're inserting quality people into the right roles and responsibilities. But with AI being in the midst of all of this, the game is completely changing in how we need to start looking at how we partner with AI. So it's not just an individual contributor that goes into a specific role, but then paired with AI, we're going to start harnessing the power of both generative AI and humans and be able to solve a lot of the problems that we have not been able to solve. So authoring this book has been a pretty long journey in the sense that we've transformed the way we work, the way we think to certain capacity from an agile standpoint, and now with the intermingling of AI, well, what happens in the next in our world? So I talk a little bit about roles, responsibilities, the future of AI, how we can utilize coding capabilities with AI, such as GitHub Copilot or Cursor or Windsurf and Opus, things of that nature, and how we can go into the next phase of AI to increase and harness and also ensure that productivity has been boosted as well.
Okay, so that sounds good. And like, we work in this field already for more than 8 years, and we work with quality assurance too. And my question to you, because it's based on AI, like from our perspective and our experience and expertise in this area, we know that to make some great AI solution, you need to have a great data for that. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, data is the critical aspect of quality assurance, right? And I think a lot of, in hindsight, even without AI, I don't think much prominence was given to data as much as tests. Like when you're doing software testing, your primary focus for most organizations are on the UI screen, right? But I think that needs to shift, right? Because when you look at telemetry from a business standpoint, most of the business users care about things such as like reporting. There's a great example of one is reporting, right? So reporting itself is not just about UI layer. It's about what are the data that goes from one end of the system to another. And there's a lot of transformational logic. There's a lot of business logic that goes into it. And then once it forms and then it gets transposed onto a screen, if that integrity of the data is compromised, because it can happen in any of those hops and skips with ETL and a lot of these transformation that takes place in Kafka movements and different type of canonical layers, non-canonical layers, if we're not making sure that that is not properly adjusted and fine-tuned, then we're going to have a whole host of problems with data. And at the end of all of this, it's not about the screens as much as ensuring that the customer essentially has the same data or the right data that they need populated onto a screen, whether it's for internal customers, B2B or B2C, however that data is being formalized and utilized, it makes a whole host of a difference. So now with AI in the place, I think it just, it's a game changer how we can do a lot more quality assurance, how we can do a lot more deep probing into data penetrations. So I think that data absolutely serves as a big role, and coupling it with AI helps ensure that that we can take small volumes of data, do proof of concepts, and then scale it upward, and then be able to say, okay, now we're able to do millions of transactions utilizing data reconciliations or data formats, data reviews, data integrity, things of that nature, and then ensure that your quality is at its peak.
Okay, sounds good to me. And another question based on your answer. I'm wondering, how do you guys getting the data for your product, and how much data you guys absorb and transform for that?
Yeah, I mean, it vacillates, right? So a lot of times standalone applications can kind of, be sustained with their own individual sets of data. That becomes a little bit more easier than when you have larger organizations and enterprises, conglomerates that are looking to get data from a holistic standpoint. So like a safe methodology would say there are PI planning, and within that PI planning, at the end of it, there's a systems demo. What that means is there's a group of teams, Scrum teams, or whatever teams that are working on producing a feature that needs to go out the door, requires a lot of this cohesive features and capabilities that needs to be integrated and needs to be tested. So in that sense, there's a lot of work that needs to be in place to make sure that a good comprehensive sets of data is in place to do a systems demo. Ultimately, then resulting in going into the production environment. But at the end of the day, customers, whoever that end customer is, internally, external customers, are looking at it comprehensively. They're not looking at it in isolation like an individual team is doing, right? So that end-to-end testing or that system testing that needs to be done requires a lot of coordination from a large enterprises. If you have an insurance company, a bank, that produces, taking an example of insurance company, you might have something like a member portal that is adjudicating a claim, but that claim processing takes place on the back end in a big system, right? That has a lot of logic behind it. And at the end of the day, that logic that gets composed and formulated produces a claims disposition, which then you see on a portal. So all of that requires a lot of data coordination to make sure that information is cohesively put together and ensure that the right type of logic and transaction is being done so that the right information could be produced into a front end system.
Okay, and what kind of challenges do you meet on your way there?
A lot. I mean, environmental challenges. Data itself is a big challenge. One of it, for example, I would say, and this is a big one for all organizations, especially right now with PII, data privacies, data masking. I call it more of a data de-identification, right? To make sure that data is de-identified in a production environment. Then when you're trying to move it into a test environment, it becomes very challenging because if you don't have a one-to-one data mirroring or some sort of capability to know, hey, you're John Doe here, now you're also John Doe here, and we're testing a very specific situation for that individual, it becomes very challenging to triangulate both of them in a production environment versus a data de-identified environment. And so there is that data masking, data de-identification, but then these challenges have been there for a while. So it's not that the challenges aren't there, but the fact of the matter is AI will help triangulate all of this information and be able to help support doing data simulations, which is a big thing in organizations. And I find it very interesting that this challenge has been ongoing for 5, 6, 7, 10 years now, right? And we have to figure out different ways to solve this issue because if we don't solve for it, it's going to still continue to fester. And I think one of the ways that we can solve for it is bringing AI into the mix of it. Let it simulate the data, teach it, train it, let it simulate the data, and then we can start utilizing the data and parse it out to different teams. And there's another challenge that I see with many organizations with teams also is that if I'm team A and I need a set of data here, and I make some changes on that data, well, I call it the butterfly effect. It impacts team 5 with the data that they need to use. Now they don't have that footprint of those specific set of data. Now what do I do? But if we can start developing those simulations, we can basically get it course corrected and get it back in the original pristine state that it was in more of real time than ever before.
Okay, thank you for such an open answer. And if you already start talking about AI, we hear AI everywhere. I've been attending a lot of conferences, and from every single corner, I've been hearing AI, 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 AI. But a lot of people, when they're saying that, they don't even know what it is and what kind of functionality AI plays in your product. Is that a kind of core, or is that just some co-pilot that helps you? Can you please uncover that part?
Sure. So, and absolutely, right? We're at the beginning stages of how we're essentially working and partnering with something like Copilot, right? Microsoft Copilot or whatever tool that we're using, right? Nonetheless, I think, but there was a recent study. I don't know whether it was, I think it might have been Stanford study or something that showed there was about 80% of claims adjudication that went through AI had to be reworked, right? And so I think we must not take a stance in quickly and hastily trying to utilize AI to do very key transactional things such as claims adjudication. It's a very complex system, which when you look at different systems, there are books that are thousands of pages long, right? That formulates that entire business rules engine. Now you're trying to train AI to take ownership of that, right? So to me, it seems like unless leaders, so big thing is one, leaders should not just be hearing about AI, myself, I went into closed doors 8-week implementation of utilizing AI, generative AI. My focus originally was on GitHub Copilot more than a year ago, and closed doors 8-week, very intense assessment of AI and how I can utilize GitHub Copilot. It enables you to kind of see how can a human partner with AI. What are the challenges that folks are talking about? So in this particular example, developers have this new partnership with AI, but then it resonates into leadership's ears as, hey, we can just displace maybe developers or certain amount of developers, and that is not the case. It is still a co-pilot, which means a pilot is absolutely necessary, right? So imagine running an aircraft with just a co-pilot, right? It could be catastrophic. So to reduce that type of issues from occurring, we need to partner with AI. And I think it's one of the biggest challenges. One, leadership needs to get involved with AI, not be hands-free completely. You need to be hands-on. So explore, in an environment. So these environmental exploration essentially is going to get you the right amount of results. So before rolling out something as massive to an organization, put it into a pilot mode, into a small contrived environment, test it out, ensure that it's working properly. Then you roll it out in a scaled approach, 25% of it, 15% of it, and then scale it upward to 50% of it is being done. But also being able to select the right tools at the right time. People hear about LangChain or LangGraph and do not know the difference between the two. Become a steward, become an ongoing learner of it. Try to at least understand the difference between LangChain and LangGraph and when to utilize it. A lot of people think, okay, let's abandon LangChain because it does a sequential process, and let's start looking at LangGraph because it does a lot of the other parts of it, right? Because you can go and operate things not sequentially in any type of format, right? It doesn't have to be linear. And that's not the right approach, because there are cases when you absolutely should be using LangChain instead of LangGraph. So those are the type of things I think would be very beneficial for leadership and others involved with trying to understand the power of AI, but not just focus only on one specific tool. So when I initially explored Copilot, GitHub Copilot, that was my primary focus until I said, hey, there's this new thing else out there called Windsurfer, now Cursor. Let me explore that. And I find out and maybe able to compare and contrast between the two, and then make some intelligent decision. So let's not just go with, hey, whatever is popular out there, that's the one that we need to choose as an organization. Everything vacillates. Everything is based off of what works for your organization. So give it a pilot, give it a try, give it a go after that.
Okay, so thank you for the answer. And yeah, if we're talking about the co-piloting and efficiency of the AI core, as an example, we had one project for the healthcare insurance companies in UK, and by implementing AI Copilot, we helped them to cut off about 99,600 working manual hours per month, which is huge. And if we're talking about AQUA Framework, how much time that can save for the engineers?
Oh, that's a very interesting question, actually, because when I actually went into the quest on the AQUA Framework, trying to isolate on just software testing alone, well, I embarked on a bigger journey because I was very keen on understanding the problem statements, right? So language is a big problem for human beings, etymology. Yeah. And so, I think I might have shared this with you before. If I use the word orange and you think of it as a fruit and I think of it as a color, right?
Yes, we spoke about that before. Yeah, we already had the conversation.
We're way off base, right? And being able to describe something to human beings in a language with contextualization has always been a challenge. And I will remind viewers of one thing. I was reading back in the 80s when I first embarked on this journey of quality assurance, 90s, and the quality assurance. Back in the 80s, there was a study that was done that said 75 to 80% of all anomalies arise because of a lack of communication. What's interesting is that that number is, to me, has not really changed much. We have outgrown things. We have
True.
now AI adopted, but still that festering problem of communication still arises. So with that said, one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to understand if there is a way that I can take a product development view and approach to quality assurance. And I started creating statements, simple statements, a vision statement. And I've interacted with AI, and it was actually able to take a vision statement and take that and create features and create design documents. And then from there, we can utilize things like Mermaid or various design documents that, it would take that draw.io, it would take that information from a natural language and create these wonderful sequential documents and things like that, engineering documents. That was never there before. So you can go from an idea essentially to prototyping, to design, to test, and develop. Whereas once it would probably take me, I would say, a month to go from an idea to development on an MVP. So it's not to say you have a complex design and you want, it will obviously take a lot more time. But if you want to do something very simple, you can do it in days as opposed to month. Where you could take a prototype, where you can take that idea all the way down to a prototype, to a design doc, or to a development phase. I think that is astronomical. So in my study, when I did it for that 8 weeks, it took me a pretty lengthy period of time to first analyze and interact with Copilot, interact with Opus, to get to where I need to at an end state. But once you do that and you know how prompt engineering works, you can speed up things exponentially. Prompt engineering is a big topic. I'm not going to get into it in this segment, but it's a big topic. Now, if you become a good learner of these things, well, now you're empowering yourself to get to that speed, more of, they call it speed to market. I call it acceleration to market now, right? So we are in that speed of, we have to get it out quickly without defects. So when I peeled the onion layer back, and then I went into software testing, I can take that, statement, and with Copilot, I can create BDD, Gherkin syntax from there, from that, and so it's an output. So it's basically being able to interact. And from that Gherkin syntax, if people are familiar with software testing or development, then I can take what we call feature files from the Gherkin syntax. So as a product owner or a business analyst, going from your statement to transcribing it into that language that people could really understand, well, you don't have to educate people now on how to write great BDDs, natural language. Use the power of AI to generate it for you, and then, be able to test it and be able to execute it. It generated the code for me. So I did not have to sit there and create the code. So, but I did need to prompt it. So prompt engineering is absolutely necessary, and you have to kind of interact with it, and then reprompt, and then help AI really understand what it is that you're trying to do. There's some amount of time that you need to take and spend on that. But once you do that and you become better at it, you can develop a test case. You can develop hundreds of test cases. And from there, I was able to generate variations of test data. As an example, if I'm building an ATM machine out for the first time, I want to be able to test all the different currencies and denominations of what I am, inputting into the system for dollar values and things of that nature. Well, as a human being, I have to hit if I was doing manual testing, I have to hit every single one of those test cases individually and execute those test cases, which takes an abundance amount of time. Now you have at the fingertip AI that will essentially create those various test data for you. And then you're just running the coder through the machine.
Okay. That's pretty long and open answer. Thank you for that. And let's say this is nowadays, and yeah, you're definitely right. And from our perspective, that's pretty much the same vision that AI, it's a great tool, it's a great co-pilot that can make your life much, much easier. But at this point, it is not ready to replace the human. And if we're talking about, let's say, near future, maybe 5 or 10 years from now, where do you see the AI in that time, and where do you see the AQUA framework after the timeline?
Sure. I mean, it's hard to see many things from with what's coming.
Oh yeah,
You're
the things are changing very, 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 very fast.
and so even with ChatGPT, they didn't intend to roll out ChatGPT, right? They intended to roll it out to leaders, and then suddenly, people caught whim of it, and now it's being rolled out to, every single human being that's essentially using the internet, right? So it's kind of hard to kind of predict some of that, but using some of those type of intuitions, I would say, and some of the empirical data that I'm looking at, right? A couple of things. So one, it is getting better. So when you looked at Copilot, GitHub Copilot 1 or Copilot or whatever it is, now they have 4, right? And even with GitHub Copilot, they're partnered with Claude, with Opus. So now Opus is actually powering a lot of the GitHub Copilot code, right? So you have the ability to toggle what you need at the right time. So if you're a developer, you can go with Opus, or you can go with Sonnet, right? But it depends on what it is that essentially you're doing. So just like an iPhone with new generations that is coming ahead, right? We're on what iPhone? What are we on? 16? I don't know. I lost track of it years ago. So
Anyone is 17
and so
with the orange color. And again, we're getting back to the orange. You think about the fruit, I think about the color.
yeah, no, so I think there is it obviously is, with the Opus 4, it's more powerful than the original version of it, right? So if these companies are essentially designing things that are becoming more robust, less hallucinations, right? Less prompting required. So I don't think that human beings are not necessary. I think we are absolutely necessary. In the age of, if we could take a look at back in the days when we first got introduced to, the internet, websites, there was no concept of websites. We were advertising on billboards. We were handing out collateral materials. You don't see
Oh yeah.
materials and print materials anymore. You seldom see, you still see, billboards, but all of that has been kind of faded away into this online venue. So a lot is changing, but it's our ability as human beings not to just focus on our IQ, but also to focus on our CQ and EQ, which is the change quotient and the emotional quotient that is necessary to, morph with these changes, adopt with these changes. And when we do, we can think about solving more problems more differently, right? Because a lot of our time has been enmeshed into doing a lot of mundane things. So I, as a software tester, do not necessarily want to sit here and execute 500 test cases. If I can have AI do it, wonderful. Then it alleviates me from doing a lot of the edge cases that I should be focused on. Right? So everyone is given the same amount of time. Human beings are all given the same amount of time. There's no difference in that. That's a common denominator. So time is a premium. So given that time, it's our ability to be able to utilize that time collectively. So if I once had, a 40% of defect spike in my production environment, with AI, I should be looking at maybe moving from an OKR from 40% to maybe 20%. And then how can I, as a human being, do edge cases, exploratory testing, those type of things to reduce it down to 10%, right? So it gives me the freedom of the mind that I need to focus there so that AI can do its magic, do its work, right? And occasionally I would probably have to babysit AI periodically here and there to ensure that it's running properly. But that mundane work should be handed off. So strategically, as as any organization, as an AI leader, and if you don't have an AI leader in the organization, I really challenge you to start thinking about that also, but also have that comprehensive view of what that strategy looks like cohesively, and making sure that that we work still with our individual contributors. The human mind has also some components that AI does not have, which is also a major concern for me at this moment, diving into AI, is the ethical part of it. We are going to embark on ethical portions in proportions that we have never seen before. In banking, in healthcare, all of this, BFSI, the wealth management, there are individuals that are already penetrating the system. So now give them the power to do deep fakes. Now we're giving them the power to do a lot of these things it's insane to think what they are going to be able to do. But we need leaders we need individuals that can kind of think through what those penetrations could eventually look like. I have been thinking through this over the last 6 months, and I said, my gosh, where have we come to now at this point that we're also empowering these people also? Because it's hard enough to ensure security in organizations without AI. So there's a lot of these different challenges ahead that we have to think about. So what does that do essentially, as you were asking? Well, it introduces new security roles that needs to be now defined, right? So on one hand, you might have, you might hand some things off to AI, where it may replace a lot of the human things that we do, manual interventions, like you said, saving I think you said 16,000 hours or something to that degree on a monthly basis, but you still have that other part of the gaps that we still need to fill.
Yeah, that's like what we are saying right now. A lot of people kind of scare from AI that AI will take their jobs. And what I always say, AI will not take your jobs. The people who can use AI will take your jobs if you cannot do that. And a couple of years ago, I was at Summit, and one of the speakers said that, guys, if you want to stay in business in a couple of years, you have to not just start thinking about AI, you have to start implementing this now, because a couple of years later, that will be too late for that. And at that time, I just kind of remember that. I'm like, okay, let's see if that person was right. And he was damnly right. And nowadays, AI is everywhere. And the people who knows how to use it in the right way, taking the better positions all over the place and all over the globe. And based on that, we're slowly but surely getting out of the time. And I want to ask you one thing. Based on everything that we discussed and I just said, what would you say to our listeners about AI in the future? What can they do with that? And what would you suggest to do with that?
My strong suggestion is to explore, right? Learn and explore. We have to do that. We cannot be left behind. One thing I always believe in is giving people back their time. Work-life balance is very important to people. Individuals. Some hours that you can do, utilize AI to give them their life back, it is an astronomical thing that you can do for human beings, right? And because what it does essentially, I don't think people realize the psychology of it, but the human being is always thinking, right? When you're at the work environment, you're thinking. But then here comes 10 other things that the humans have to essentially do, context switching, right? But if we can prevent those type of things from occurring in the future, and help our employees get to a standpoint where we do less of those context switching, well, now my focus could be very directed to my task at hand. The last thing you want to do is disturb someone that's actually doing some critical thinking, and now they lost what they're thinking about because they have to do 10 other things here. Well, then you want to know the true root cause of why many of those defects appear in the production environment. Give those developers the time they need to develop what they enjoy, what they're doing, so they can focus there, and less quality issues would essentially arise. Exploration is very important. Learning is very important. I know some leaders that are actually taking stride to learn. They may not have the hands-on, but I would challenge them to also, hey, open up your keyboard or your laptop. Go into an environment. Download GitHub Copilot or download Opus. And N8N. I didn't know a thing about N8N. right? But when I started exploring it, suddenly realized that, hey, there are these things that I can follow along with on different channels, YouTube and some other, Udemy and other sources, LinkedIn Learning, that you can go in and actually understand how this thing all works cohesively. But if we don't become that lifelong learner, sure, we can be obsoleted, right? But we cannot be obsoleted before AI, right? So
Oh yeah.
that was never the question. The question is, become that lifelong learner that you can actually do that exploration. And no, AI is not perfect. Human beings are not, I am not perfect. You're not perfect, right? We make mistakes. So,
What do you mean?
you know, Yuri, but, um, and so those challenges will be still there. And I think we just have to kind of subjugate it by becoming learners, doers, thinkers, and alleviating a lot of that mundane things right off to AI and continuously evolve. These things are going to start getting a lot more intelligent and smarter. Analytics is a big thing. It's a huge thing. I can't even emphasize to you top product companies that are not using data analytics to come up and derive at right solutions and still spending millions of dollars in capital trying to understand and do studies where the data is at their own fingertip.
Yeah. So, Jaison, one more time, thank you for the answer. That was a pleasure to talk to you today. I really appreciate your time and thank you for finding this time to join us today.
Thank you so much, Yuri. Thank you, guest. Appreciate it.
Yes. And to all listeners, I want to say thank you guys that you've been with us today. That was Empower the Data, our lovely podcast where business begins with data and AI leads the way. We're going to keep this series of the podcast, and the next week we're going to meet another very interesting guest. So stay with us and let's the data win. So Jaison, thank you. Have a great day. And for our listeners, I want to say the same. Ciao for now, guys.